Okay, we're going to kick off our end of year review by talking about topic 1 from the review packet, which is polynomial division. Our first question asks us to solve a giant polynomial divided by a much smaller one, and it's asking just for the quotient. Now the quotient is the result of dividing that excludes the remainder. So all we have to do is kind of look for the bulk of our solution. Now there are a lot of different ways to solve this problem. We could use long division or synthetic division. I used synthetic division because it's much faster. I'm going to show you how to do it both ways. So I'm going to do long division, I'm going to do synthetic division first, just so you can see how easy it is to get our answer, and then I'll do long division next to it so that you can see we get the same solution. It just takes up a little bit more space. So doing synthetic division, I have to start with the divisor here, the thing I'm dividing by, which is x minus 1. And I have to solve it for x to find out what number to use in my division. So I would take my x minus 1 and set it equal to 0. I would have to add 1 to both sides, so x would be the number positive 1. It's basically the opposite sign of whatever's inside with x. That number goes in the top left corner of my division. The rest of my division comes from the coefficients of the polynomial that I'm dividing, so the coefficients of the numerator. So I'd end up with a positive 4 in front of x cubed, a negative 9 from x squared, a positive 9 from x, and a 3 from the number by itself. I have to make sure that I don't need any placeholders, but I jump straight from the third degree to the second degree to the first degree to no degree, so I haven't skipped anything. Now I'm ready to go ahead and start my division process. The first thing I do is bring down my first number, 4. I multiply it by whatever's in the top left corner, so I multiply it by 1 and write it underneath the next number in line. Then I add up and down. Negative 9 plus 4 is negative 5. Again, I take this number, multiply it by the top left corner, I get negative 5, and I add up and down. So 9 minus 5 is 4. And again, one more time, I multiply it by the top left corner and write it underneath the next number and add up and down. Now this is my answer. All I have to do is put my variables back in. Since my first variable in the original was x cubed, the first variable down here is going to be x squared. So we're going to end up with 4x squared minus 5, and this one's just going to be an x, and then we're going to get plus 4, that positive 4, and it's just going to be a number. And the 7 ends up being a fraction over the original thing I was dividing by, which was x minus 1. And that would be my final answer. It just asks for the quotient, which is the part excluding the remainder. So that would be the quotient right there. Let's go ahead and get that same answer using long division. Using long division, I put the thing I'm dividing by outside the division symbol and the numerator inside. So 4x cubed minus 9x squared plus 9x plus 3. Okay, so now once we've got the problem set up, what we're going to do to begin the long division process is we're going to compare the first number on the outside to the first number on the inside. And we're going to ask ourselves, what do I have to do to x to turn it into 4x cubed? What do I have to multiply it by? And the answer to that is, to get the 4, I have to multiply it by 4. And to get from x to x cubed, I must multiply it by x squared. I'm missing 2 x's there. So now that I've picked the number from out in front, what I'm going to do is distribute this 4x squared. I'm going to distribute it to both of the numbers that are in front of my radical. I have to multiply by both. So first I'll multiply 4x squared by x, and I get 4x cubed, which is exactly what I wanted. Then I multiply 4x squared by negative 1, I get negative 4x squared. For my next step, I have to line up my process and compare this to what I wanted. I'm going to subtract. So the easiest way to subtract is to change all of the signs that I just got and then just add up and down. 4x cubed plus negative 4x cubed is just 0. And negative 9x squared plus 4x squared is negative 5x squared. That's it for my process. I'm just going to be repeating that process over and over again. So I'm going to bring down the next term, and we're going to do that again. We're going to start by looking at the term on the left and compare that to this one out front and ask myself, what do I have to multiply x by to turn it into negative 5x squared? I must multiply it by negative 5, and to turn x into x squared, I must multiply it by x. Now we're ready to distribute this. Remember to distribute the negative as well. So negative 5x times x is negative 5x squared. That's exactly what I wanted. and negative 5x times negative 1 becomes positive 5x. Now in the next step, we're going to go ahead and subtract, so I line this up, change all of my signs, and then I'm ready to add up and down. So negative 5x plus 5x is going to be 0, and 9x minus 5x is 4x. And I'm ready to go ahead and do this one more time. Bring down my plus 3, and we will ask ourselves, what do I have to do to x to turn it into 4x? I must multiply it by positive 4. We'll distribute that to what's in the front here. We end up with 4x minus 4. We can change all of our signs, minus and plus, and then add up and down. 3 plus 4 is 7. And you'll notice what we end up with is 4x squared minus 5x plus 4, right here. That's exactly what we got right here. And this 7 is the remainder, which would be plus 7 over what we were dividing by, x minus 1, which is the exact same thing we got. But the long division process takes a lot more work. So we can always use synthetic division if the thing we're dividing by is just to the first power and has a coefficient of 1. So since I'm just dividing by x to the first power with a coefficient of 1, I don't have to worry about using long division at all. Let's go ahead and take a look at question 2. This time I'm only going to use synthetic division because, again, it is much faster. So for question 2, the thing we're dividing by has a, which is to the first power, and has a coefficient of 1. So I can use synthetic division. So I'm going to go ahead and take my a plus 2 and set it equal to 0 to find out what number is going to go in the top left corner, and it's going to be negative 2. So negative 2 goes in the top left, and then I take my coefficients, invisible 1, negative 6, negative 10, 20, and 15, and I'm going to go ahead and use synthetic division. So I'll bring down my first term, multiply it by the top left, negative 2, and add up and down. I get negative 8. I'm going to take that negative 8 and multiply it by the top left. It'll become positive 16, and add up and down, I get 6. Multiply it by the top left, negative 12, add up and down, I get 8, and 8 times negative 2 is negative 16, add up and down, I get negative 1. Again, the first power I had up here was a to the 4th power, so this is going to be a to the 3rd to start my result. 1a to the 3rd, which is just a to the 3rd, minus 8a squared, plus 6a, plus 8, plus, or this time it would be minus, 1 over the thing I was dividing by, a plus 2. And this question is just asking for the remainder, which means this would be my final answer. That's the remainder we're looking for. Let's go ahead and take a look at one more division problem. So this equation, so we have 3x cubed plus 5x. We have to divide it by x plus 1. And this is the type of answer we're going to get. What you'll notice is this is just a quadratic. This is just a polynomial, like we got up here. So up here we had a cubed, a squared, a, and a number, and then we had a remainder. And that's exactly what's happening down here, except because my highest power is 3, the result starts with squared, then goes to 1, then just a number, and a remainder. So it's just telling you that that's kind of what your answer is going to look like. And what it is asking for, I accidentally cut it off, is it's asking for us to find b, r of x, and q of x. And we're going to be able to do that after we divide. So the numerator is what's on top. That's what we're dividing. 3x cubed plus 5x. And we're dividing it by x plus 1. Now let's go ahead and set up some synthetic division again, because x plus 1 is what we're dividing by, and x is only to the first power and has a coefficient of 1. So I'm going to do x plus 1 equals 0 to find the number that goes in the top left corner, which is going to be negative 1. Now for the rest of it, I have to be really careful, because in order to fill in the coefficients, I have to make sure I have every single one. But I start with the 3rd degree, and then I skip x squared, and I go straight to the 1st degree. And then I skip my number. So I've skipped 2 things. I have no x squareds, and I have no numbers at the end. So I actually have to include those. Oh, there were 5 x's there. Oh yeah, that's the 1st degree. Haha. All right, so I have to actually include those as placeholders. So what I'm going to end up with is an equation that looks like this. 3x cubed plus 0x squared plus 5x plus 0. So I have two placeholders of 0. And now I can take the coefficients that I need. So I'm going to need the coefficient 3, the placeholder 0, the coefficient 5, and the placeholder 0. And then I'm going to be ready to do my synthetic division. So I'll bring down my first term 3, multiply it by the top left corner and write it under my next term, and then add -1. Multiply that by my top left corner, write it under my next term, and add up and down. We get a 6. Multiply that by the top left, and add up and down, -6. Oh, that's not right. I got overexcited. Let's try that again. You guys are probably all watching this going, that's not how you do math, Mrs. Purvis. We're going to blame that one on the baby. Okay, here we go. So I'll bring down my first term, which is 3. And when I multiply it by -1, I get -3. Yeah, that's what I was supposed to do. And then when we add up and down, we get -3. Here we go. That seems a lot more right. -3 times -1 is +3. Add up and down, we get 8. Multiply by the top left, I get -8. And when we add up and down, that's just a -8. That's much better. Okay, so to write this as a result, we're going to have 3, and it's going to be the coefficient of x squared. Our -3 is going to be the coefficient of x. Our +8 is going to just be a number, and the -8 is going to be the remainder over the thing I was dividing by, which was x plus 1. Now, this question is just asking for 3 pieces of information: b, r of x, and q of x. B is just the number in front of x. The number in front of x is -3, so b is -3. R of x, it says, is the numerator, which is this -8, and q of x is just the denominator, which is the thing we were dividing by to begin with, x plus 1. And that problem is all done. We're going to pick up in the next video with our second topic, systems of equations.